Ladies and gentlemen, I think the sobering message from Jannis is that transformation isn't optional. It's not something we would just like to see. It's something we have to see. And it can be very challenging. It will be very challenging. It will bring some pain with it too. But also, as Jannis also pointed out, real opportunity as well. And it has to mean and has to involve everybody along this food production chain, from farmers and producers to all of us as consumers. We all have to buy into this transformation. And one of the challenges is getting people at every point on that journey to understand that they have a crucial role to play. Part of it is about psychology, and that's by way of beginning an introduction to our first terrific guest speaker. Now, I'm not going to pretend to you that I knew Espen Stoknes before this morning. I just had the pleasure of meeting him before our session began. But once I began to Google him, and Per will know that Googling can be dangerous, but once I started Googling Per, I thought, my God, this guy is so incredibly interesting. He is a professor at a Norwegian business school. He is a trained psychologist. He is a Green Party activist politician. He has delivered an extraordinary TED Talk, I think it was back in 2017, which took the world by storm, examining the psychology of the economic choices that we face with regard to climate change and addressing climate change. He's just published, last year published a book, Tomorrow's Economy, a guide to creating green, healthy growth. So just by way of that introduction, you can tell this is a guy that we need to hear from, and he's paused on the steps as I give him his introduction. We're going to hear from him right now. So Per, the floor is yours. I'm really looking forward to this.
Thanks, Stephen, and thanks for such a warm introduction. So, we're all here to transform the entire food system, from farm to fork, based on the best facts, the best methods, systemic thinking, the best practices, right? We know the problem, the solutions are available, but how do we bring not only producers, retailers, researchers, but also the consumers, or rather the citizens, on board? So everyone eats. 450 million Europeans or EU members eat every day. How do we engage them in solving our interlinked climate, nature, food crisis? How can we broaden the conversation beyond the choir? This is the question I will address and also provide you with some tools that you hopefully can apply. So some would suggest that we should start with educating the consumer, giving clear, consistent information to them out there, building trust by credible knowledge, crowding out the misinformation, the confusion out there. We, the experts, have the facts and the data, they lack it. Sorry, I have bad news for you. Research shows that showing people research doesn't work. I'll do that again. Research shows that showing people research doesn't work. So this is what I call the science of science communication, or particularly the science of sustainability communications. One key concept that I'll give you right away is called the information deficit approach. We're knowledgeable people, and we tend to assume that they don't know. They're like empty buckets. So what you need is to give the uneducated masses facts and data knowledge into their bucket, and then you can watch them fill up and change. Sorry, there are 5 well-documented psychological mechanisms or defenses that stop this from happening. And I will provide those 5 quite briefly. First is distance. Like climate, the food system, the soils, the nutrients, the groundwater, the roots, they are invisible. They're out of sight. And unlike COVID or unlike a traffic jam, it's somewhere else. We call this psychological distancing. It doesn't mean people don't know where the food comes from. It means that psychologically it's not proximate or near when they think about it, where this food comes from. They just eat. And like CO2, nitrogen, one of the critical planetary boundaries, is running off into waterways and causing aquatic dead zones and soil erosion, is far away. So immediately when you try to criticize people for eating food that eats up the planet or destroys it, people don't feel that. It feels far away in time. It's somewhere else in space. Time is far out, like 2050 crisis, or the time and the place is far away. It's somewhere else, not where I live. And also, my opportunities for influence are far away. I'm very small. It doesn't matter what I do. And finally, the responsibility is somebody else's. So these four mechanisms of distancing make people feel that the food crisis is not near and personal. Second is doom. Not just do we have a climate crisis, but we also sometimes hear about the sixth mass extinction since the dinosaurs. It's only 60 harvests left. There's a phosphor deficit, and we will have famine and hunger. And if you try to get the crisis through that way with an overuse of doom messaging, you get three predictable psychological responses. One is that people habituate. Oh, I can't take another apocalypse today. Two, you start to avoid the messenger because, oh, you know, these people are just goddamn tree huggers or sustainability activists or whatever. And three, I start to avoid the messages, so I'll just switch my attention to something else. So these are predictable by-effects of overusing doom. Three, we can call dissonance. So after distance, doom, we have dissonance, and cognitive dissonance is an internal state. I know what I should eat, but I eat something else. So there's this tension between my knowledge and what I actually do. I know about the climate impact of meat, but here we go. Then the brain steps in. Automatically, we have this subconscious mind that at any time, it's a kind of excuse machine that comes up with self-justifications quicker than you can notice. So suddenly I would say, well, actually my neighbor, they eat much more meat than I do. Or my colleague, she flies much more often to the Canary Islands than I do, or whatever. So it's always them, it's not me. I actually eat quite responsibly. Second, I can start to believe the misinformation and the confusion out there. And third, I can bring in something else. For instance, I've trained so much today. Now I've deserved this double portion of ice cream with a banana split and chocolate sauce. So the brain helps me kind of get out of this dissonance very quickly. And if you're not aware of that dissonance, it will destroy your information messages. Fourth, denial. So we have distance, doom, distance, doom, dissonance, and denial. And denial is not knowing it, but having a double state. So in my subconscious, I've put all the uncomfortable facts about food. So being a Norwegian, use an example from home, we love Norwegian salmon, don't we? But Norwegians are in denial about where that salmon gets its feed from. So we're eating rainforest soy, and we prefer not to think about it. And each time we hear another news about it, we put it down there in the cellar. So denial is a strange state of both knowing and not knowing at the same time. It's not about being ignorant or stupid or immoral. It's a magnificent machine of the brain to get rid of troubling knowledge. Finally, it's the core of ourselves and the most difficult barrier when it comes to engaging people and changing food behaviors, and that is identity. Identity has to do with self-values. What kind of person am I? How do I vote? What do I do professionally? And how do I eat? Of course, it's not just, as the Germans say, man isst was man isst. It also goes deeper to what kind of person am I? And where do I belong? So it's not just about French terroir or the Italian grandma recipes. It is how do I present myself to those I care about when I invite people for dinner? How do we define our family through food? And this is key, because if you criticize what people eat, because of this identity barrier, people will feel they criticize you or me, not the food. The food is me. I am the food. And if you moralize or criticize what I eat, you're attacking me. And what happens then? And this is where the food conversation goes bad, because then I have to defend myself. I have to fight back, and I will criticize you. So those 5 are our challenges when we want to share thinking and understanding and facts. And I'm not in any way against science. I'm just telling you how science is now exploring how the brain responds to science. So what works? And I'll sum up again in 5 tools you can use if you want to engage the 450 million Europeans in food systems transformation. First, remember that all real change and engagement is social. It's not based on facts or data or charts. It's based on what my friends are doing. What are the people I look up to? What are they doing? My peers. So this social dynamic, we sometimes call social norms. What do I think people I like would do in the same situation? What are they eating? What would they like to see us eat? So since the Last Supper by Christ, food has been the most social core of our communities. So when we provide information, it's not about carbon footprint or calories, it's about community. It's networks, relationships. So by activating social norms, we can have a more direct influence into the brain, and we avoid the distancing, because the human brain is a social scanning machine, really. I look at others. What are they doing? Are they more above me or below me in status? And that's the kind of things that fill up most of our brain, not charts. Second, simple. If it's hard to change your eating habits, it won't happen. The bad news is that people are inattentive. They don't have time to look into the labels and the ingredients. They are inconsistent when they look for something to eat, or they just follow old habits. Now, the good news is that people are inattentive and they don't think much about what they do, and they have bad time. So if you put it to the default, so when I go to a buffet or a restaurant or to a shop and I get out of there, suddenly I pick the climate-friendly or the nature-friendly food without thinking much. That's where we want to go. We call this nudging, and happily there will be a separate session on it. Where are you, Jack, Bobo? There, over there, after this afternoon. So I won't go deeper into it right now. After making it social and making it simple, we need to make the food communication supportive and be aware about your framings. What is a frame? I'll do an ultra-short experiment with all of you. Are you okay? I'm a psychologist, and it's not going to hurt much. But I need you to follow, look at me now and follow closely and put away your phone or whatever. Are you ready? Here's an experiment. 1, 2, 3. Do not think of an elephant. No, do not think of an elephant. And particularly, do not think about a pink elephant. What happens in the brain now is that you can do one or two. You can either think hard about a chocolate bar or a car or something to avoid that stupid elephant that's coming up from where in the behind you. Or you can say, I don't care about what Stoknes say. I'm going to think about an elephant as much as I want. In any case, whether you do or you don't, you have been framed. And the same thing with food communication. It's always framed. And there are 3 supportive framings I would like to share. One is the health, which I know you know well, so I won't spend time on it. Your health makes it feel near and personal. But the other is opportunity. So how can we eat ourselves into a better society, a better economy, a better food system with regenerative ag or circular nutrients or biogas, but also new opportunities such as precision fermentation or urban ag or whatever. I don't care. I'm now putting you to awareness of the frame. How are you framing what you're engaging with? And the idea is that, yes, we have threats, but we also need 3 positive supportive frames in order to have a positivity ratio. So that's what creates the most engagement. 3 to 1. 3 opportunities for each threat. Finally, we need signals, because I might change my behavior, but if I don't get feedback, it stops. The motivation runs out. So whether it's from apps or from some kind of dialogue or groups, carbon conversations, food conversations, whatever, I will easily slip back to my old habits. And finally, point is storytelling, which is what you guys are doing. So as you all know, food is a story, and each food comes with a story. This has been, shall we say, perpetuating or dispersing itself through society and marketing over the last decades. But we need to move beyond just the small story to a larger narrative. And this is what Jannes was taking up. How can we paint an authentic story, tell an authentic story about what a nature-positive, a climate-positive food system really looks like? And then it's not just me, but then I feel part of a much larger movement. It feels meaningful to do something because I share this story, and that creates a sense of community and collective effort. So with those 5, I hope some of them at least can be used. I'll throw myself. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for your attention.
Rest your legs. Thanks, Per. That's fascinating. How do you think agriculture is doing when you give this list of things that are useful tools to overcome the drag factors that you put out so well? How do you think the food system sector, you know, if you compare it, say, with transportation, compare it with energy, how is the food system doing?
I'm not a food system analyst, so I have to just speak from where I'm coming from. And my perception is that it's incredibly segmented and fragmented. In a way, it's each part of the food chain for itself. And then, because it's programmed, as Jannes Potočnik was explaining to us, according to conventional economics, suddenly you get this extreme cost pressure along each of them, and they are locked into a self-defeating fight of minimizing my cost and not having a look at the other parts of that system. Systems fragmentation would be my first answer to that.
Do you think it's particularly difficult in food to change behaviors? And if we just focus on consumer behavior for a while, is it particularly difficult? Because as you alluded to, there's an incredibly personal, identity-based relationship we have with our food, and therefore we're very invested in what we do, what we consume, and what we've always done in the past. It's quite difficult to overcome that.
Yeah, but if you compare with another couple of other sectors, we have, for instance, the transportation sector or the building sector. So the car is my personal space in the world, so that's pretty personal. And my home is also pretty personal. And then comes food. But I think of the 3, I would say food is the most intimate, because I ingest it, it becomes me. And hence, if somebody, as I was hinting on in my speak, if I try to change your way of eating, then immediately you will have that psychological resistance. And this is very, very automatic when it comes to food. Everybody who's worked as a psychotherapist knows what resistance to change is. So people come in and they would like to say, I have an alcohol problem. Sometimes I beat my kid. And if I as a psychotherapist, well, why don't you stop drinking too much? The only thing you achieve is to accentuate that resistance. So it's very, very sensitive how you approach that resistance to changing the way people eat. If I perceive that you, if you were my therapist, and I want to change the way I eat, let's say I'm overweight, or I eat the wrong kind of food, or I have some addiction, and if I feel that you really respect me and trust me, then I may be willing to listen to your questions, but maybe still not to your advice. So it's all about building that relational trust before you introduce what we could call the interventions. And that timing is critical.
And what I take from that is that simply, as a sort of food retailer, putting very big red labels on foodstuffs that are full of fat or full of sugar or full of whatever, that isn't going to work. Or at least that's not the most sort of sensitive and useful way of doing it.
One of the most researched fields in psychology is the behavior of smoking. So did it help to show people labels with smoking is dangerous, or lung cancer, or kills, or whatever? Not really. It did some influence, helped some, but it didn't really change. So what did change it was when you regulated it into somebody that everybody would have to respond to. So I could see that you are no longer smoking indoors, hence I won't do it either. So we accept going out, and then politically it was possible because it was done just after an election in most countries, and then you had 3 years more to see that the air actually was cleaner, and people would see a benefit from that until the next election.
You're a trained psychologist. You sort of used to sort of looking at the way people think and respond. Do you think there is something happening that's... Is there something happening that's sort of intergenerational here? I mean, I just think of my own kids, all 3 of whom will not drink dairy milk, 2 of whom are vegan or almost vegan. I'm just wondering whether these messages and the different ways in which behaviors can be changed and reinforced, they are having an impact, and there's a generational element to it. What do you think?
There definitely is a generational element to it. Research shows that the most effective climate communicator, and also I would assume, I haven't seen the exact same thing on food, but food as part of the climate change, is a teenage girl. So if there are any parents out there having a teenage girl, you will know what I'm speaking about. Suddenly, it's not just some scientist up on a stage showing charts that we'll crash the climate in 2100. It is that girl looking at you this way, and you feel you're losing your respect. So it really gets under the skin, even of elderly white men like myself.
Do you speak as the father of a teenage girl? Or
well, I have teenage boys, but...
yeah.
So...
But that point about, because if something really interesting is happening between generations, and particularly with the younger generation, then that's going to have a big follow-through. That means something is already stirring that's really important and will be lasting in terms of its impact.
Yes, they haven't spent 30, 40 years of investing in their identity, building up resistances to change, defining who they are, and getting respect from their peers based on the kind of food and the house and the car you have. So, in a way, they don't have that much to lose, Stephen.
And in terms of where the most important messaging comes from, we have governments who are very involved in trying to change the way in which we consume, to be much more aware of the environmental impacts, everything from climate to biodiversity. We have NGOs who are very active. We have the climate movement, which has a lot to say about food production. Where do you think the most effective messages come from? Is this about what governments can do most of all, or is it actually not necessarily government first?
Yeah, this is one of the classic questions I often get. So in my latest book, Tomorrow's Economy, the entire 3rd part is on what I call the triangular system. Where does the change start? How do you get on with the systems change? And of course, if you do systems thinking, you have to start everywhere. And the 3 main actors in the system are individuals or citizens. It is business, the producers, and it is government. And of course, it's the interaction between these 3 that are interesting. So if government does something, and the politicians do need to be re-elected, will they gain citizen support by introducing these kind of changes? And of course, businesses that take on the extra cost of investing in uncertain new technologies, will they be supported either by government or by the customers if they put additional cost on it? And if you immediately see that this doesn't really work, then you get a negative feedback, and rather than having a virtuous cycle where individuals support governments, then governments support business, and businesses provide citizens with a means to simple change, and then you go on, you have the opposite, which we have seen over the last decades, which is a vicious cycle where any change in the individual is not met with the sufficient availability of convenient, nature-positive foods, and then, of course, governments do not follow up those innovations so that they lose out market shares and are outcompeted by the big, heavy market players. So this is a crucial change, starting a self-reinforcing loop between those three parts of the system.
Yeah. Sadly, Per, I'm very aware, because I have a clock right in front of my eyes here, that we're pretty much out of time. I wish we could talk more, but I know you're going to be around and people can come up to you and have another chat with you, because your work is fascinating and it's a slightly different take, I think, from much of what we're going to be talking about in our panel. So it's been terrific to get your perspective. Thank you so much for your keynote, for answering my questions. Ladies and gentlemen, please give Per a very big thank you. Per, thanks a lot.